GLS is go for FTS arm.
Now inside of 5 minutes remaining
GLS
until
is go
launch
for
time.
LH2 high flow bleed check.
We've heard calls in the last couple of minutes that pressurization is underway on the core stage propellant tanks. NASA has confirmed that the 4 RS-25 engines are conditioned for launch. They're at the proper temperatures.
GLS is go for core stage APU start.
Now the 4 core stage auxiliary power units, or KPUs, are being fired up at the launch pad. These are the hydraulic power systems that power the steering mechanisms on the 4 RS-25 engines at the base of the core stage. In the next few moments, we should see the steering profile check of the 4 RS-25 engines.
GLS is go for purge sequence 4.
For the call from the ground launch sequencer controller that they are go for purge sequence 4. Inside of 3 minutes until launch. Pressurization now underway on the core stage liquid oxygen tank. T-minus 2.5 minutes. And there we have the engine steering profile check on the core stage. The KPUs, the core stage auxiliary power units, driving thrust vector control actuators to check the steering profile of the RS-25 engines. These 4 engines will generate about 500,000 pounds of thrust apiece, burning a liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen.
Internal power.
T-minus 1 minute 40 seconds. The core stage will be transitioning to internal battery power momentarily.
GLS is go for core stage to internal power.
T-minus 60 seconds, 1 minute remaining until the launch of NASA's Artemis 1 lunar test flight. Mission Control in Houston will take control of the Orion spacecraft and the launch after liftoff. At T-minus 30 seconds, the ALS, the autonomous launch sequencer on the Space Launch System, will take control of the countdown from the ground launch sequencer.
GLS is go for ALS.
And there's the transition to automated launch sequencer, 30 seconds to go. Ignition of the 4 RS-25 engines is planned at T-minus 6 seconds.
20. 15.
T-minus 10 seconds.
GLS is go
Hydrogen
for core stage
igniters have
start.
fired. There's the sound suppression water system. RS-25 engine ignition. booster ignition, and liftoff of the Space Launch System, Artemis 1, on the way to the moon.
Five engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour.
Space Launch System arcing toward the east from Kennedy Space Center.
Good control on the roll from teams
8.8 million pounds of ground-shaking thrust.
Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into
big
launch.
rumble here at the press site about 4 miles from the pad.
On the rocket. SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust. Quiet here in the loops and mission control. The 4 core stage engines are throttling down ahead of passing through max Q. Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles per hour. The 4 core stage engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison at about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring.
Hope you enjoyed the sounds of the powerful solid rocket boosters on the Space Launch System. We're now about 20 seconds from the expected burnout of the 2 solid rocket boosters. They will jettison to fall into the Atlantic Ocean. They will not be recovered on this mission.
Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter.
There is burnout and jettison. Both solid rocket boosters have separated
Confirmation that the solid
from
rocket
the Space
boosters
Launch
have
System.
separated. These
Great view of the 4 core
boosters.
stage engines continuing to fire.
Now the core stage continues
That
to
core
power the
stage will
flight
burn
of
for another
Orion, all
6
4
minutes or so.
RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange.
Those
2
engines
minutes and
burning at
36 seconds into the flight.
109% of rated performance.
Hearing
as
nominal
expected.
calls here in Mission Control Houston. We've still got 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation. Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange. We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated.
We've heard confirmation from Mission Control Houston that the service module aerodynamic fairings have jettisoned.
And that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well.
And we've heard confirmation from MCC Houston that the launch abort system motor, jettison motor, has fired.
We just heard the call for 3-engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the mission, we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff time. However, we still have 4 good engines, all at maximum thrust right now, powering the first flight of Artemis at 5,200 miles per hour, 148 miles downrange.
Four minutes, 10 seconds into the flight. We're about halfway through the core stage's performance on this Artemis 1 test flight. No issues reported.
We're 4 minutes and 16 seconds
so
into the flight of Artemis 1.
4 RS-25
so
engines
far, we've
continue
had
firing.
a clean ascent.
A clean
we
ascent.
saw those solid rocket boosters jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds after liftoff. Shortly after, we had the service module panels fairings separate, as well as the launch abort system. The launch abort system was inert for this flight, except to perform this separation. Those 4 core stage engines will continue to fire and power the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 6,800 miles per hour, 229 miles downrange. Booster flight controller reports that the engines are looking good.
Five minutes into the flight, 3 minutes remaining in the
Our
core
core
stage
stage
burn.
main
All
engine
four
cutoff time
engines
is about 8
continue
minutes
firing.
and 3 seconds. We are now at 5 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, 7,656 miles per hour. Again, 4 good core stage engines, those 4 RS-25 engines. The last time those core stage engines flew, they were taking space shuttles to orbit, and now with upgraded capabilities, they're launching the future of human spaceflight.
4 minutes or 5 minutes, 40
5 minutes,
seconds
42
into
seconds
the flight.
into the mission. We are now traveling
Velocity
8,800
now
miles per hour,
8,800 miles per hour,
345 miles
345
downrange
miles
from the launch pad at
downrange.
Kennedy Space Center.
Everything looking good. A little more than 2 minutes remaining in the core stage burn.
Again, we are anticipating core stage main engine cutoff at about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And about 10 seconds later, we'll see core stage separation, at which point Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will be flying
Space launch system
free.
core stage engines continue to be visible from our location here at Kennedy
Now
Space
traveling
Center
over
on the
10,000
eastern
miles per
horizon.
hour, 6 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1, 427 miles downrange. Quiet here on the loops in Mission
Starlight
Control Houston. Teams
beacon
continue
on
to
the
monitor
eastern
this
horizon
first
as
flight.
the space launch system continues downrange. Plus 6.5 minutes.
About a minute and a half now until that core stage main engine cutoff time. Our 4 core stage engines continue to fire maximum thrust.
Here's a neat animation from NASA showing what the current configuration is of the space launch system. The 2 boosters jettisoned as we saw a few minutes ago. All 4 engines on the core stage continue firing.
Coming up on 7 minutes since launch today, now traveling over 12,800 miles per hour, 563 miles downrange. Again, still quiet here in Mission Control Houston.
miles downrange. Artemis 1 has now disappeared from view behind some clouds just above the eastern horizon.
As we prepare for main engine cutoff, the 4 RS-25 engines are beginning to throttle down. "30 seconds now until core stage main engine cutoff. All 4 engines continue to throttle down.
The 4 RS-25 engines are throttling down to maintain a constant acceleration
now 7 minutes,
on the
45
vehicle.
seconds into the flight,
As we
traveling over
approach main engine
16,000 miles per hour.
16,000 miles per hour, the current velocity.
Continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston. We're standing by for core stage main engine cutoff.
MECO, main engine cutoff.
And we have confirmation of core stage main engine cutoff. Orion is now in Earth's orbit. The flight dynamics officer reports that we have a nominal main engine cutoff. And we just heard the call for core stage separation. That means Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage are now flying free from the core stage of the Space Launch System. The next milestone will be solar array deployed approximately 18 minutes after liftoff. But before Orion stretches its wings, let's check back in with our friends at Kennedy Space Center and hear all about